The routine traffic stop. On a warm, sunny afternoon, Judge Marcus Johnson was driving home from a long day at court. The trees lining the street were in full bloom, and the gentle breeze made it a perfect day. Marcus loved these moments when he could enjoy the little things in life. He smiled at the children playing in their yards and waved at neighbors washing their cars. He felt good. As he approached an intersection, Marcus noticed the traffic light turn yellow. He pressed the gas pedal slightly to make it through. Suddenly, he saw flashing blue lights behind him. Confused, he pulled over to the side of the road. What could this be about? He wondered, his heart beginning to race. The police car parked behind him, and an officer stepped out. The officer was tall, with a stern face and a firm stance. He walked up to Marcus's car, tapping on the window with authority. Marcus rolled down the window, offering a polite smile. "Good afternoon, officer," he said, trying to keep the mood light. "License and registration," the officer demanded, his voice lacking warmth. Marcus felt a twinge of unease, but kept his composure. He reached into the glove compartment to retrieve his documents. As he handed them over, he noticed the officer looking at him with a mix of suspicion and disdain. Marcus was used to wearing a suit in the courtroom, but today he wore a simple polo shirt and jeans. He didn't think his attire would matter, but the officer's attitude felt different. "Is there a problem, officer?" Marcus asked, trying to understand why he was pulled over. "You ran a yellow light," the officer replied, still scanning Marcus's face as if searching for something. Marcus felt a flicker of frustration. "I was trying to make it through." "It was yellow, not red," he said, trying to remain calm. The officer's expression hardened. "I'll need you to step out of the vehicle," he ordered. Panic surged through Marcus. He knew his rights as a citizen and as a judge, but in that moment, he felt vulnerable. "Why do I need to step out? I haven't done anything wrong," he replied, confusion lacing his voice. "Step out of the car now," the officer barked, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. The insistence in his voice made Marcus's heart pound even faster. Reluctantly, he opened the door and stepped out onto the pavement. The afternoon sun beat down on him, highlighting the tension in the air. As Marcus stood outside his car, he noticed other drivers slowing down to watch the situation unfold. He felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. He was a respected judge in the community, known for his fairness and dedication to justice. Yet here he was, treated like a criminal for a simple traffic stop. The officer reached for his handcuffs, a gesture that sent chills down Marcus's spine. "Wait, you don't need to do that," he protested, his voice steady but filled with concern. "I am Judge Marcus Johnson. I can provide you with my ID." But the officer didn't seem to hear him. He was caught up in his own assumptions and biases. "You think just because you're a judge, you can get away with everything," the officer spat. The words stung Marcus like a slap. He was shocked and hurt that someone would think that of him. "Listen," Marcus said, trying to stay calm. "I'm not trying to resist. I just want to explain my side of the story." He took a deep breath, knowing that shouting would only make things worse. But as he tried to speak, the officer continued to escalate the situation. "You're under arrest," the officer said, the finality in his voice echoing in Marcus's ears. Confusion turned to disbelief. "For what?" Marcus asked, his voice rising in frustration. "You're making a mistake." The officer did not respond. Instead, he pulled out his radio and called for backup. The situation was escalating, and Marcus felt trapped. He couldn't believe this was happening to him. He was a judge, not a criminal. As the officer placed the handcuffs on Marcus's wrists, he could see the onlookers whispering among themselves. Some were shocked. Others had their phones out, recording the entire event. Marcus's mind raced. He needed to stay composed, but anger was boiling inside him. In that moment, he thought about his family, his career, and the unfairness of the situation. He had worked hard to earn respect in his community, and now everything was at risk because of a biased officer. As the officer pushed him toward the police car, Marcus knew he had to keep his cool. He would not let this man define who he was. He glanced at the faces of the people watching, hoping they would understand the truth one day. The officer opened the back door of the police car, and Marcus felt a wave of humiliation wash over him. He knew he had to fight back against this injustice. As he sat in the car, his mind raced with thoughts of what he could do next. He needed to call this lawyer and make sure this incident was not forgotten. The routine traffic stop. On a warm, sunny afternoon, Judge Marcus Johnson was driving home from a long day at court. The trees lining the street were in full bloom, and the gentle breeze made it a perfect day. Marcus loved these moments when he could enjoy the little things in life. He smiled at the children playing in their yards and waved at neighbors washing their cars. He felt good. As he approached an intersection, Marcus noticed the traffic light turn yellow. He pressed the gas pedal slightly to make it through. Suddenly, he saw flashing blue lights behind him. Confused, he pulled over to the side of the road. What could this be about? He wondered, his heart beginning to race. The police car parked behind him, and an officer stepped out. The officer was tall, with a stern face and a firm stance. He walked up to Marcus's car, tapping on the window with authority. Marcus rolled down the window, offering a polite smile. "Good afternoon, officer," he said, trying to keep the mood light. "License and registration," the officer demanded, his voice lacking warmth. Marcus felt a twinge of unease, but kept his composure. He reached into the glove compartment to retrieve his documents. As he handed them over, he noticed the officer looking at him with a mix of suspicion and disdain. Marcus was used to wearing a suit in the courtroom, but today he wore a simple polo shirt and jeans. He didn't think his attire would matter, but the officer's attitude felt different. "Is there a problem, officer?" Marcus asked, trying to understand why he was pulled over. "You ran a yellow light," the officer replied, still scanning Marcus's face as if searching for something. Marcus felt a flicker of frustration. "I was trying to make it through. It was yellow, not red," he said, trying to remain calm. The officer's expression hardened. "I'll need you to step out of the vehicle," he ordered. Panic surged through Marcus. He knew his rights as a citizen and as a judge, but in that moment he felt vulnerable. "Why do I need to step out? I haven't done anything wrong," he replied, confusion lacing his voice. "Step out of the car now," the officer barked, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. The insistence in his voice made Marcus's heart pound even faster. Reluctantly, he opened the door and stepped out onto the pavement. The afternoon sun beat down on him, highlighting the tension in the air. As Marcus stood outside his car, he noticed other drivers slowing down to watch the situation unfold. He felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. He was a respected judge in the community, known for his fairness and dedication to justice. Yet here he was, treated like a criminal for a simple traffic stop. The officer reached for his handcuffs, a gesture that sent chills down Marcus's spine. "Wait, you don't need to do that," he protested, his voice steady but filled with concern. "I am Judge Marcus Johnson. I can provide you with my ID." But the officer didn't seem to hear him. He was caught up in his own assumptions and biases. "You think just because you're a judge, you can get away with everything," the officer spat. The words stung Marcus like a slap. He was shocked and hurt that someone would think that of him. "Listen," Marcus said, trying to stay calm. "I'm not trying to resist. I just want to explain my side of the story." He took a deep breath, knowing that shouting would only make things worse. But as he tried to speak, the officer continued to escalate the situation. "You're under arrest," the officer said, the finality in his voice echoing in Marcus's ears. Confusion turned to disbelief. "For what?" Marcus asked, his voice rising in frustration. "You're making a mistake." The officer did not respond. Instead, he pulled out his radio and called for backup. The situation was escalating, and Marcus felt trapped. He couldn't believe this was happening to him. He was a judge, not a criminal. As the officer placed the handcuffs on Marcus's wrists, he could see the onlookers whispering among themselves. Some were shocked. Others had their phones out, recording the entire event. Marcus's mind raced. He needed to stay composed, but anger was boiling inside him. In that moment, he thought about his family, his career, and the unfairness of the situation. He had worked hard to earn respect in his community. And now, everything was at risk because of a biased officer. As the officer pushed him toward the police car, Marcus knew he had to keep his cool. He would not let this man define who he was. He glanced at the faces of the people watching, hoping they would understand the truth one day. The officer opened the back door of the police car, and Marcus felt a wave of humiliation wash over him. He knew he had to fight back against this injustice. As he sat in the car, his mind raced with thoughts of what he could do next. He needed to call his lawyer and make sure this incident was not forgotten. The sun continued to shine, but all Marcus could feel was the weight of the situation. He was determined to prove his innocence and show the world that he would not be silenced. What happened next would change everything for him, and he was ready to fight back. The public outcry. As Marcus sat in the back of the police car, the weight of the handcuffs felt heavier than ever. The afternoon sun beat down on him, but he felt a cold chill running through his body. His mind raced with confusion and anger. How could this happen? He was a respected judge, not a criminal. The feeling of humiliation washed over him, but he knew he had to stay strong. News of the incident spread quickly. The people who had stopped to watch began to share their videos and opinions on social media. The hashtag Justice for Judge Johnson began trending within hours. People from all over the community started expressing their disbelief and outrage at the way Marcus had been treated. Many were quick to defend him, sharing stories of his dedication to justice and fairness in the courtroom. As the officer walked back to his patrol car, he had no idea of the storm brewing on social media. He believed he was just doing his job, but he was about to discover the consequences of his actions. The radio crackled, and the officer received a call from his sergeant. "You better get this under control," the sergeant warned. "There's a lot of chatter about this incident." Meanwhile, Marcus's phone rang in his pocket. It was his wife, Lisa. She had seen the videos and was frantic. "Marcus, what is going on? I just saw you being arrested on TV." Her voice trembled with worry. "I'm on my way to the police station. Just hang in there." Marcus felt a rush of comfort hearing her voice. "I'm okay, Lisa. Just a misunderstanding. I'll explain everything when you get here." But deep down, he knew this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. This was about more than a traffic stop. It was about the biases that existed in society. As the minutes passed, Marcus watched as more police cars arrived on the scene. Officers stepped out and began to talk to the crowd that had gathered. Many of them had come to support Marcus, brandishing signs that read "Justice for Judge Johnson" and "Stop Police Bias." It felt surreal to him. He had always seen himself as a protector of justice, not as someone who needed to be defended. A few moments later, Lisa arrived at the police station, her face a mix of anger and concern. She rushed inside, demanding to see her husband. The officers at the front desk exchanged glances, but eventually led her to the holding area. As soon as she saw Marcus, she rushed to him, tears in her eyes. "What are they doing to you?" she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around him. Marcus hugged her tightly, grateful for her support. "It's okay, Lisa. They made a mistake. I'll get through this." He wanted to reassure her, but he knew the reality was more complicated than that. Suddenly, a news crew arrived, cameras rolling. A reporter approached Marcus and Lisa, asking if they could get a statement. Marcus glanced at Lisa, who nodded. He knew this was an opportunity to speak out about the injustice he faced. "I never expected to find myself in this situation," Marcus began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm a judge who believes in justice for all. This isn't just about me. It's about the systemic issues we face in our society. We must hold those in power accountable." The reporter nodded, captivated by Marcus's words. "How do you feel about the officer who arrested you?" she pressed. "I believe in due process," he replied. "But I also believe that we must confront bias and educate those who hold positions of authority. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter their background." The segment aired later that evening, quickly going viral. Support poured in from across the nation. People were inspired by Marcus's courage to speak out against injustice. Many shared their own experiences of racial profiling and mistreatment by authorities. Back at the station, the officers were becoming increasingly anxious. The sergeant paced back and forth, his face filled with worry. "We need to figure out how to manage this situation before it escalates further," he said to his team. They knew that if they didn't handle this correctly, it could lead to serious consequences for the department. As night fell, Marcus was finally released from custody, but the battle was far from over. He walked out of the police station hand in hand with Lisa, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. Reporters swarmed them, asking questions and pushing microphones into his face. Marcus felt overwhelmed, but he knew he needed to keep pushing forward. The next morning, he received a phone call from his lawyer, Sarah. "Marcus, we need to take action," she urged. "This incident needs to be addressed legally, and we must ensure that the officer is held accountable for his actions." Marcus agreed, understanding that the fight for justice was not just about him. It was about everyone who had faced similar challenges. He was determined to use his platform as a judge to advocate for change and fairness. As they drove home, Lisa squeezed Marcus's hand, offering silent support. They both knew that this was only the beginning of a long journey, but they were ready to face whatever came their way. The community was rallying behind them, and together they would work to bring about change. The fight against injustice had only just begun, and Marcus was prepared to lead the way. The fallout. The morning after Marcus's release, the city buzzed with excitement and tension. News of the wrongful arrest had spread like wildfire, igniting protests and rallies. People gathered in parks and on street corners, holding signs and chanting slogans demanding justice. Social media was flooded with opinions, and Marcus found himself at the center of a storm he never expected to be part of. Marcus woke up early, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He had always dedicated his life to justice, but now he realized that his personal fight would resonate far beyond his own experience. He looked at Lisa, who was already awake, her brow furrowed with concern. "What are we going to do, Marcus?" she asked softly. "We need to keep pushing for change," he replied, his voice steady. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about all the people who have been mistreated and ignored." After breakfast, they prepared for a press conference at the local community center. Marcus felt nervous, but knew he needed to be a voice for those who felt voiceless. Lisa held his hand tightly as they walked into the room filled with reporters, cameras, and concerned citizens. As he stepped up to the podium, the room went silent. Marcus took a deep breath, scanning the faces in the audience. Some were familiar, others were strangers, but they all shared a common purpose. "Thank you for being here today," he began. "I stand before you not just as a judge, but as a member of this community who has faced injustice. My recent arrest has sparked a conversation that we must have about systemic bias and police accountability." His words resonated throughout the room, and he could see nods of agreement from the audience. Marcus continued, "We need to create a world where everyone is treated with respect and fairness, regardless of the color of their skin or their background. It is our duty to ensure that this does not happen again." After his speech, people lined up to express their support. Many shared their own stories of discrimination and unfair treatment by the police. Marcus listened intently, feeling a sense of solidarity and urgency in their voices. It was clear that this issue affected many, and together, they could push for change. As the press conference wrapped up, the media buzzed with excitement. Reporters asked for interviews and updates. However, there was one request that stood out, a request for Marcus to speak on national television about his experience. It was an opportunity he couldn't refuse. Later that evening, Marcus appeared on a popular news program. He was nervous but determined to use this platform to spread his message. The host, a well-known journalist, introduced him. "We're joined tonight by Judge Marcus Johnson, who recently made headlines after a shocking wrongful arrest by a police officer. Judge, thank you for being here." "Thank you for having me," Marcus replied. The host asked about the events that led to his arrest, and Marcus spoke candidly about his experience. He emphasized the need for dialogue and reform in the police force. This incident was not just a mistake. It highlights the deep-rooted issues within our system. We must work together to bring about change. As the interview continued, the host pressed for details about the officer involved. "What do you think should happen to him?" she asked. Marcus paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I believe in accountability. Officers must be held responsible for their actions. Training and education on bias must be a priority in our police departments. This is not just about punishment. It's about prevention." The next day, the hashtag Justice for Judge Johnson trended nationally, with people sharing the interview and discussing the broader implications of racial bias in policing. Marcus received messages of support from all corners of the country, and he felt empowered to continue his fight. Meanwhile, the police department faced immense pressure from the public. The chief of police called an emergency meeting with his team to address the growing discontent. "We need to act fast," he said, looking around the room. "The community is outraged, and we must show them that we are committed to change. We cannot let this escalate further." As the days passed, protests continued to grow, and the public demanded accountability. The city council announced plans to review police procedures and implement new training programs. Marcus knew this was a step in the right direction, but he also understood that change wouldn't happen overnight. One evening, as he and Lisa sat on the porch, they reflected on the whirlwind of events. "It's amazing to see people coming together for a cause," Lisa said, her eyes shining with hope. "But it's also exhausting. I worry about how this will affect you." "I know, but we have to keep fighting," Marcus replied. "This isn't just about me. It's about our children and the future we want for them. I want to create a world where they don't have to worry about being treated unfairly because of their skin color." Lisa nodded, understanding the gravity of their mission. "I believe in you, Marcus. You're making a difference." As they sat in silence, watching the sunset, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it. He was not just a judge. He was a voice for justice, and he would fight until the very end. Little did he know, the fight was only beginning, and the events that would unfold would change his life forever. The community was rallying behind him, and together, they would challenge the status quo and demand a better future for all. The call to action. Days turned into weeks, and the city remained a hotbed of protests and discussions about police reform. The community rallied around Judge Marcus Johnson, seeing him as a symbol of hope and change. As the support grew, so did the pressure on the police department to respond to the public outcry. One crisp morning, Marcus received an unexpected call that would change everything. It was from a prominent activist named Clara Reynolds, known for her relentless work in fighting racial injustice. Clara was organizing a large rally to demand accountability from the police and wanted Marcus to be one of the key speakers. "This is our chance to make a real impact," she urged. "With your story and your voice, we can mobilize even more people." Marcus felt a surge of excitement mixed with nervousness. "I'd be honored to speak, Clara," he replied. "But I want to make sure we're addressing real change, not just making noise." "Absolutely," Clara exclaimed. "This rally will focus on concrete demands: better training for officers, community oversight, and policies that hold officers accountable for their actions. It's time for a change, and we need your support." After hanging up, Marcus shared the news with Lisa. "Clara wants me to speak at a rally," he said, his voice filled with determination. "This could be a turning point." Lisa smiled, but there was a flicker of concern in her eyes. That sounds great, but you know it won't be easy. The tensions are still high. I know, Marcus replied. But if I don't use this opportunity to speak out, I'll be letting everyone down. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about all of us. As the rally date approached, excitement built within the community. Flyers were posted everywhere, and social media buzzed with the hashtag Justice for Judge Johnson. Marcus felt a sense of purpose unlike anything he had experienced before. He was not just a judge. He was now a leader advocating for change. On the day of the rally, the atmosphere was electric. Thousands of people gathered at the city square, holding signs, chanting slogans, and expressing their hope for a better future. Marcus stood backstage, watching as the crowd swelled with energy. He felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration as the time to speak drew nearer. Clara introduced Marcus to the crowd, and as he stepped up to the microphone, the noise slowly faded into an expectant hush. He looked out at the sea of faces, many of whom had shared their stories of discrimination and injustice. It was a powerful moment. "Thank you for being here," Marcus began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Today, we stand together not just as individuals but as a community demanding change. My recent experience is not an isolated incident. It is a reflection of a systemic problem that affects us all." As he spoke, Marcus felt the weight of his words. He shared his story, detailing the shocking events that had led to his wrongful arrest. He spoke passionately about the need for reform in policing, emphasizing the importance of accountability and transparency. The crowd responded with cheers, and Marcus could see the determination in their eyes. "Together, we have the power to change our community," he continued. "We must push for policies that hold those in power accountable and ensure that no one else suffers like so many have before. This is our fight, and we will not back down." The crowd erupted into applause, and Marcus could feel the energy surging around him. He had tapped into something much larger than himself, and it was exhilarating. As the rally continued, various speakers took the stage, sharing their experiences and visions for a better future. The air was filled with hope and determination, and the community felt unified in their quest for justice. But as the rally reached its peak, Marcus noticed a group of police officers standing at the edge of the square, observing the crowd. He felt a wave of apprehension wash over him. Would this peaceful demonstration be met with hostility? Just as he finished speaking, a young woman named Maya stepped forward, holding a megaphone. "Let's make our voices heard," she shouted. "We demand justice, and we will not be silenced." The crowd echoed her sentiments, chanting loudly. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A few officers moved closer, and the tension in the air became palpable. Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He didn't want the day to end in violence or confrontation. Clara noticed the change in mood and quickly stepped in front of Marcus. "Everyone, let's remember why we are here. We are advocating for change peacefully. Let's keep this peaceful." The crowd started chanting again, their voices rising in solidarity. Justice for all. Justice for all. The unity among the people was a powerful reminder of why they were gathered. Marcus felt a renewed sense of hope. As the rally came to an end, people began to disperse peacefully, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a larger fight. The police chief had promised to address the issues raised, but Marcus knew that words were not enough. They needed action. The next day, as Marcus returned to his regular duties as a judge, he was met with mixed reactions. Some colleagues expressed their support, while others remained skeptical, unsure about the implications of his newfound activism. But Marcus stood firm in his convictions, determined to push for change not only in the courtroom but also in the community. While he dealt with the backlash, he also received messages of support from around the country. Many people reached out to share their stories of racial bias, reinforcing Marcus's belief that he was fighting for something much larger than himself. As the weeks rolled on, the fight for justice continued. Marcus was determined to use his platform to advocate for change, knowing that the road ahead would be long and challenging. The incident had opened his eyes to the systemic issues in society, and he was ready to take action. Little did he know, the challenges he would face would test not only his resolve, but also the strength of the community that stood behind him. The aftermath and unforeseen consequences. In the days following the rally, the community buzzed with energy and determination. Marcus Johnson felt invigorated by the support he had received. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered. The police department was under scrutiny, and the media focused heavily on the judge's wrongful arrest. This attention brought both hope for change and fear of backlash. As Marcus returned to his duties, he noticed a shift in the atmosphere at the courthouse. Some colleagues offered nods of approval, while others exchanged whispers behind his back. He could sense the division. Some saw him as a hero, while others viewed him as a threat to the status quo. The pressure was mounting, and Marcus had to navigate this delicate balance carefully. One afternoon, while reviewing case files, Marcus received an unexpected phone call. It was Clara Reynolds, the activist who had helped organize the rally. "Marcus, I wanted to update you on our next steps," she said, her voice filled with excitement. "We've scheduled a follow-up meeting with community leaders and police representatives. Your presence would be invaluable." "I'd be happy to attend," Marcus replied, eager to contribute to the ongoing conversation about reform. "But I want to ensure it's not just talk. We need concrete plans to address these issues." "Absolutely," Clara agreed. "We'll push for actionable items that can lead to real change. I believe we can make a difference." As the meeting approached, Marcus felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The day finally arrived, and he entered the community center where the discussion would take place. A diverse group of people had gathered, including police officers, community leaders, and citizens affected by racial injustice. Clara welcomed everyone, her energy infectious. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "Today we are here to discuss how we can work together to create a safer and more just community for everyone. Let's start with Judge Johnson's experience, as it has highlighted serious issues that need to be addressed." As Marcus shared his story once again, he noticed a few police officers fidgeting uncomfortably in their seats. He spoke candidly about the need for accountability, transparency, and training to address biases within the department. The crowd listened intently, and he could see nods of agreement. However, when the police chief stood up to speak, the mood shifted. "While we appreciate the community's concerns, we must remember that police work is complex," he began. "We are dedicated to keeping the community safe, and sometimes mistakes happen." Marcus felt a pang of frustration. "But those mistakes can have dire consequences. We need to prevent them from happening in the first place," he interjected, his voice steady but firm. The chief responded, "We are always looking for ways to improve, but we can't just change everything overnight." As discussions continued, it became clear that while there was a desire for change, there was also resistance. Some officers seemed reluctant to admit that their practices needed reevaluation. Marcus noticed several community members becoming increasingly frustrated. The meeting ended with more questions than answers. Though everyone expressed a desire to collaborate, Marcus could sense the underlying tension. Change would not come easily, and he would need to be prepared for pushback. The following week, a news article broke that changed the dynamics once again. It detailed Marcus's involvement in the rally and highlighted his recent call for police reform. The headline read, "Judge Johnson, a beacon of change or a threat to law and order." Suddenly, Marcus found himself at the center of a media storm. As the days passed, Marcus received a flurry of messages, some supportive, others critical. He felt the weight of the scrutiny and began to worry about the impact on his career. Would he still be respected as a judge? Would his advocacy put him at risk of backlash from law enforcement? One afternoon, while Marcus was at home, he received a call from the State Judicial Committee. They wanted to meet with him to discuss his recent public statements. His heart raced as he wondered what they would say. Was his position as a judge in jeopardy? He knew he had to approach the meeting with honesty and integrity. When the day of the meeting arrived, Marcus entered the committee room, greeted by a panel of stern faces. Judge Johnson, the chairperson began, "We appreciate your commitment to addressing community concerns, but your recent public statements have raised questions about your role as a judge." "I understand," Marcus replied, taking a deep breath. "But my role is not just to uphold the law. It's also to serve the community. I believe in advocating for justice, especially when it comes to issues of racial bias." The chairperson nodded. "We respect your passion, but we must also consider the implications of your advocacy on the judiciary's impartiality. It's a delicate balance." Marcus felt a surge of determination. "I will always strive to be impartial in my role, but I cannot turn a blind eye to injustice. If my advocacy puts me at odds with my duties, then perhaps we need to reevaluate what it means to be a judge in our society." The meeting continued, with discussions that made Marcus reflect on his position and responsibilities. While the committee expressed concerns, they also acknowledged the importance of the issues he was raising. "We appreciate your insights, Judge Johnson. We need to consider how to address these matters going forward." As he left the meeting, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. He knew that his advocacy for change would not be without challenges, but he was also aware that his voice could inspire others to join the fight against racial injustice. In the days that followed, Marcus saw both support and criticism online. Some praised his courage, while others called for his resignation. He reminded himself that this journey would be filled with ups and downs. Yet he remained committed to fighting for justice and accountability, knowing that his actions could lead to a brighter future for his community. The battle for change was far from over, and Marcus was prepared to face whatever lay ahead. He had sparked a conversation that could not be silenced, and he would continue to advocate for those who felt unheard and marginalized. The community rallies together. As Marcus Johnson continued to navigate the fallout from the recent media coverage, he was heartened to see that the community had begun to rally around the issues he had raised. The rally had sparked a renewed interest in police reform, and people were starting to organize their voices. Local activists, concerned citizens, and even some sympathetic police officers were reaching out to him to discuss ways to make a positive change. One evening, Marcus attended a community meeting at the local library. The atmosphere was electric, filled with energy and determination. People were eager to discuss their experiences with law enforcement and share stories that had been hidden for too long. Clara Reynolds, the activist who had organized the previous rally, was there to facilitate the discussion. "Tonight, we're here to listen to each other," Clara announced as she stood before the crowd. "We all have our stories, and together, we can find a path forward. Judge Johnson has bravely shared his own experience. Now, we want to hear from you." As the meeting unfolded, people shared their experiences with law enforcement, stories of discrimination, fear, and misunderstanding. Some spoke about feeling targeted for their race, while others recounted moments where they had felt helpless in their encounters with the police. A young woman named Tasha stood up and shared her story. "I was stopped by the police just last month for a broken taillight. They pulled me out of my car, searched it, and treated me like a criminal. I was terrified. My brother was arrested for a similar reason last year, and he didn't even do anything wrong. It makes you feel like you're not safe in your own neighborhood." The audience listened intently, nodding in understanding. Marcus felt a surge of compassion for Tasha and all the others who had been affected. He stood up to speak, his voice steady. "Tasha, thank you for sharing your story. It's important that we recognize the fear and pain that many community members feel. This is not just about policing. It's about our right to feel safe and respected." The crowd applauded, and Marcus continued, "We need to come together and advocate for real change. We must push for training programs that address racial bias, community engagement initiatives, and transparent policies that hold officers accountable for their actions." Another man, Thomas, raised his hand. "But what if the police don't want to change? What if they resist our efforts?" Marcus met his gaze firmly. Change is never easy, especially when it challenges the status quo. But if we stand united, we can create pressure that cannot be ignored. Our voices matter, and we can make a difference together. As the night went on, the discussions grew more passionate, and ideas for future actions emerged. The crowd brainstormed potential initiatives, such as community workshops on understanding citizens' rights, collaborations with local police departments to improve community relations, and outreach programs for youth. By the end of the meeting, they had created a list of actionable items to pursue. The energy in the room was palpable, and Marcus felt a renewed sense of hope. He knew they were on the brink of something significant. The following week, Clara contacted Marcus with exciting news. "We've planned a series of community forums, and I want you to be our keynote speaker at the first one. We'll invite police representatives, community leaders, and residents to discuss solutions together." Marcus agreed, feeling honored to take part in such an important initiative. He understood the weight of his words and the influence he could have in bridging gaps between the community and law enforcement. As he prepared for the forum, he spent time researching best practices for police reform and listening to voices from communities across the nation. On the day of the forum, the auditorium was packed. Community members filled every seat, and police officers were present, eager to listen and engage. Clara introduced Marcus, who stepped up to the podium, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. "Thank you all for being here," he began, looking out at the sea of faces. "Today, we are not just here to talk. We are here to listen and to learn from each other. The stories I've heard have been powerful and moving. They remind us that we share this community, and we all deserve to feel safe and respected." As Marcus spoke, he laid out the ideas discussed in previous meetings: training programs for police, community engagement initiatives, and the importance of accountability. He emphasized the need for open dialogue and collaboration between law enforcement and the community. The police chief took the stage next, and the crowd leaned in with anticipation. "We know there are issues to address," he said, "and we're here to hear your concerns. We want to work together to improve our relationship with the community." The audience erupted in applause, but Marcus noticed some skepticism. He understood that words alone wouldn't bring about change. Actions would need to follow. Clara moderated the discussion, inviting questions from the audience. One resident stood up. "What specific changes will the police department implement? How can we be sure this is not just talk?" The chief responded, "We will establish a community advisory board to ensure that residents have a voice in policing practices. We also commit to implementing mandatory bias training for all officers." While some were satisfied with these commitments, others raised their hands, eager to challenge the status quo. Marcus felt proud of the community's engagement and willingness to hold their leaders accountable. As the forum wrapped up, the excitement in the room was infectious. People exchanged contact information and discussed their next steps. Marcus left feeling energized, knowing that they were building a movement for change. However, he also sensed the challenges ahead. Not everyone would be supportive, and he could expect pushback from those resistant to change. But Marcus was ready for the fight. He knew that together, they could make a difference and create a safer, more equitable community for everyone. The road ahead would not be easy, but the journey had already begun. The unexpected outcome. The weeks following the community forum were a whirlwind of activity. The advisory board was established, and residents began to see the fruits of their labor. Marcus, now an integral part of the initiative, was heartened to see how the community had come together to address the issues of police misconduct and racial discrimination. However, amidst the positive changes, there was an undercurrent of tension. Some police officers were hesitant about the new policies, fearing that they would be unfairly judged or held to impossible standards. Rumors circulated that some within the department were resistant to the changes, and this added to the anxiety in the community. One evening, while preparing for a community meeting at the local park, Marcus received a call from Clara. "We need to talk. There are whispers of discontent within the police department. Some officers are unhappy about the changes and feel like their integrity is being questioned. Marcus felt a knot in his stomach. What do you mean? Are they threatening to push back against the community? I'm not sure yet, Clara replied, her voice tense. But we need to address this openly before it escalates. I think we should hold a town hall meeting where both officers and community members can voice their concerns. That night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, deep in thought. The progress they had made was significant, but he understood that progress could be fragile. They needed to create a space where both sides could express their feelings honestly. He picked up his phone and called Clara back. Let's set up that town hall meeting. We need to hear from both sides before things get out of hand. The town hall was scheduled for the following week, and the turnout was astonishing. The gymnasium was packed with community members and police officers alike, all eager to discuss the growing rift. As Clara welcomed everyone, Marcus felt the weight of the moment. This was a critical juncture. We're here tonight to listen to each other, Clara said, looking around at the diverse crowd. Change is never easy, and we must be open and honest about our feelings. We all want the same thing: safety and respect. Marcus stepped up to speak, addressing the crowd. I know tensions are high right now. It's okay to feel upset or confused. But we must remember that we're all in this together. We need to understand each other's perspectives if we want to move forward. An officer named Detective Harris stood up, visibly upset. I want to speak on behalf of my colleagues. We want to serve the community, but it feels like we're being painted as the enemy. We're not all bad. Most of us joined this profession to make a difference, and now it feels like we're being attacked. The room was silent as the crowd absorbed his words. Marcus felt a wave of empathy for the officers, understanding that they were facing their own struggles amidst the changes. A community member named Angela stood up next. But how can we trust you? Many of us have faced discrimination or unfair treatment. We don't feel safe. How do you expect us to trust you when we've seen the negative side of policing? The tension in the room thickened as both sides exchanged heated words. It was clear that while they wanted to find common ground, deep-rooted feelings of distrust were at play. Marcus raised his hand, calling for attention. Let's take a moment to breathe and reflect. We can't move forward if we don't listen. Detective Harris, can you share some specific challenges you face as an officer? Detective Harris nodded, his frustration slowly shifting to vulnerability. It's tough out there. Every day, we face dangerous situations, and we must make quick decisions. Sometimes, those decisions are not perfect. We want to do better, but we need support too. A ripple of understanding swept through the crowd. It became clear that both sides were operating from fear. Fear of misunderstanding, fear of consequences, and fear of the unknown. Maybe we can set up joint training sessions, Marcus suggested. Community members can learn what officers face, and officers can hear directly from the community. We need to break down these walls together. The room began to buzz with conversation as people started to consider this idea. Clara encouraged everyone to think about how they could collaborate instead of compete. Over the next few weeks, both sides worked together to create programs that facilitated dialogue. They held joint workshops where police officers taught community members about their training and challenges, while community members shared their experiences and the impact of policing on their lives. Slowly, a bond began to form. The more they interacted, the more they realized they were not enemies but partners striving for the same goal: a safe and respectful community. However, not everyone was on board with the change. Some officers remained skeptical, and the whispers of dissent grew louder. One evening, Marcus received a phone call from Clara. There's been a protest planned against the police department. It's happening this Saturday, and I'm worried it will escalate. Marcus's heart sank. We've made so much progress. Why are they protesting? Clara explained. Some community members feel the changes aren't happening fast enough, while others think we're trying to appease the police instead of holding them accountable. As the days passed, Marcus felt an impending sense of urgency. He knew that the success of their efforts hinged on managing both the growing momentum and the discontent simmering beneath the surface. On the day of the protest, Marcus and Clara arrived early to set up a space for dialogue. They hoped to provide an avenue for discussion instead of division. As the protesters began to gather, Marcus stepped forward to address the crowd. "Thank you for coming out today," he began, his voice steady. "I know there are strong feelings about the police and the changes we are trying to make. But I ask that we channel our energy into constructive conversations. We're not here to divide. We're here to unite." The crowd murmured, unsure of how to respond. Marcus continued, "Let's listen to each other. Let's share our experiences, our hopes, and our fears. Change won't happen overnight, but it will happen if we work together." Some protesters began to shout their frustrations, while others started to listen. Slowly, Marcus saw the potential for dialogue emerge from the chaos. In the weeks that followed, community relations improved significantly, but there remained pockets of resistance on both sides. As Marcus continued to navigate this challenging terrain, he remained hopeful that the path they had chosen was one that could lead to genuine change. As he stood at the intersection of community and law enforcement, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew that they had come too far to turn back. The journey to healing and understanding was just beginning, and he was committed to seeing it through to the end.